So we're now in Cuba. And you might wonder, what the fuck? Like, why did you go from Spain to Cuba? I have a friend who lives in, or used to live in Prague, and she loves Cuba, she loves Latin America, and she wanted to go on like a normal holiday. She has like a normal job. So she invited me to join her on this 2-week trip to Cuba. So I went to Prague from Barcelona, and we flew to Cuba from there. And it was completely different to the rhythm that I was taking for my trip. Like we rented a car and we drove through the island. We went to 12 cities altogether, and we would move every day or two. But practically every day. We actually only spent 2 nights in Havana on the final, like just before we got the flight back to Europe. And it was amazing. It was the first time I was traveling in Latin America, because I only know Brazil in South America. It was interesting in a way, because having lived in Europe for such a long time, I'd always have like this huge like identification with Europe and the UK. But I actually went to Cuba, and I was like, actually, I do identify to this as well. It was a bit of getting in touch with my Latin side, like of, I don't know, just like the happiness, like the music. I can't explain it. It's people are happier and a bit more. They might not be happier as in like they have a better life, but they see life in a very different way. And obviously Cuba is a communist country, so there was a lot of like shock in that as well, like of learning how people live in a dictatorship. So we did that. So the cities we went to were, I'm going to try and remember without looking, but it was Havana, Varadero, which is like a resort city that a lot of... So the tourists that go to Cuba, they usually stay in Havana and they go to Varadero, which is the place. It's got like this amazing beach. And just like they're very prepared to receive tourists. There's a lot of resorts and stuff. So after Varadero, we went to a place called Matanzas, which is a very small town with like colorful buildings. This is probably not in the right order here. This was back in April, so I'm getting a bit like my memory's not great. But we did Cienfuegos, which was our favorite city because it's so beautiful. And sadly, it was our favorite city because it was the one that we got least hassled on. Because, yeah, unfortunately, Cuba has that issue of like hassling for women. That there's two types of like the people who come and like try and sell you stuff, but you also have what they call it in Spanish, it was like jineteros. There's those people, but there's also like the men who are just like literally catcalling you, and in some places it was quite bad. But Cienfuegos was the least problematic in that sense. We loved it. We had a good time. We could walk down the street wearing shorts, and it was so hot, so we would obviously wear shorts. And it was great, amazing. I definitely recommend visiting Cienfuegos. We did Santa Clara, which is where Che is buried. We did Camagüey, which was the worst city in terms of like hassling. It was literally, we drove past it on the way to somewhere else, which I won't remember now. And we really loved the city. It had like a really nice, it had like a film industry. I don't know why. There was lots of cinemas, and there was a lot of like cinema related things. So we said like, oh, on our way back, we'll definitely stop here and stay here for a night. And then when we stopped, we went to the hostel, we dropped our stuff, and then we just decided to take a walk. And it was unbearable. Like, we were walking down like the town centre, and we could not take a step without a man saying something disgusting to us. And fortunately or unfortunately, we do understand Spanish, so we knew what they were saying. I flipped. Like, I was, after maybe less than an hour, we were walking and people saying disgusting things to us. I literally screamed in the middle of like the square. It was like a very busy square. Everybody looked at me. But I was like, it was the definition of fed up. It was like, I could not take that anymore. We went back to the hostel, which was not a hostel, actually, it was a casa particular. I'm going to go into them in a second. But yeah, we went back to the hostel and we didn't go out. So what are these casas particulares? You can stay in hostels if you go to Cuba. You can do that. It's normal. Like, you can book online and stuff. But we decided to do casas particulares everywhere we went. Basically, it means like private homes, and it's the Cuban people opening up their houses to host tourists. Obviously, there's different types of like tiers. Like, you've got like really good casas particulares. You've got the shit ones too. You can even find them in different prices. But like the ones we went like mid-range, and yeah, it was great. It was like the rooms were furnished. It looked like a hotel, like a really nice hotel. Like, some of them had like towels and stuff. Some of them had breakfast, and then it was really lovely when they had breakfast because you'd eat like actual like Cuban food, and the fruit in Cuba is insane. So what else did we do? We did Holguin. We did Pinar del Rio. We did Cayo Coco, which is another resort place that is like in development, so it was literally deserted. It was amazing. We did this place called Las Terrazas, which is a self-sustainable community. And they basically produce their own food, and they have their own like electricity and like water systems. They live a bit kind of like isolated, not completely, but kind of, and it's really nice for ecotourism. We went there and we had food in this like really lovely restaurant. Like, they would only serve food that they grow. So I mean, the food itself wasn't like amazing, but it was, you could tell that you were not eating something that came from a supermarket shelf. Yeah, and then the great salon disaster of April 2019 happened in Cuba, where the salon and everything is very cheap. I'm gonna dye my hair pink. Yay! So I like had my hair cut again, like I had the sides shaved again, and I dyed my hair literally like electric pink, or whatever you want to call that color. It just looks like a matchstick for the first week, and then after you start washing it, it just became like a really nice like lilac. It was very tiring at the end of the 2 weeks. Like, I stayed in Prague for a bit, just resting, because we were driving everywhere. Just moving constantly, and then it made me think about how this type of backpacking isn't for me. Like, I did it for 2 weeks. I'm glad I did it. I had an amazing time. But if I did it like full time, I would go insane. I think anyone would. It's quite hectic. Like, you can't even unpack your bags, which is something I love doing. One of my favorite things is arriving at a hostel and unpacking my bags, because I feel home. It helps like to adjust. We saw people fighting over chicken. Recommend going to Cuba, by the way. It's not so hard to go these days unless you're American, I'm sorry. But if you're not American, it's actually not that hard to go. They actually have good infrastructure. The roads are okay, like, they're not European roads, but they're better. Some of the roads are better than what I've seen in Brazil, actually. If you don't want to drive, then it might be a problem, like, to travel around the island. But you can go to Havana, for example. It's beautiful. It's got incredible architecture. So much history. It's insane. The food is delicious. They have Wi-Fi now in the casas particulares, and I'm assuming at the hostels as well. And they have like these public squares with Wi-Fi towers, so it's not even one of those that you have to isolate yourself and detox. Even though we did that, like, a friend and I, we decided we left our phones at home, and we only took like one phone so we could document the trip. So it was a fun experience. It was good. Yeah. I'll see you for the next video, which is going to be Croatia.